نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Allah Azza wa Jal gives many examples in the Quran, and these examples are of people, of beliefs, and of actions. So in today's recitation, we came across a few examples that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. The first one in Surah Al-Ra'd. Allah Azza wa Jal gives the example of rain which falls from the sky and then is collected in different channels or valleys. أنزل من السماء ماء فسالت أودية بقدرها. Every valley gets filled with water according to its capacity. Some valleys are very deep and wide, they're carrying a lot of water. Some are very narrow and small, they're carrying a little bit of water. These are all of those dips in the land where water accumulates. Now once the water accumulates, then it starts flowing. And as it flows, other things also start accumulating in it. And those things that were on the land are picked up by the water and they rise to the top. فَاحْتَمَلَ السَّيْلُ زَبَدَ الرَّابِيَةِ. What happens is the rubbish and the loose things, the fray things, these are all picked up by the water and they start moving. Now, a person might look at that flow of water and think, oh, there's a lot of stuff on there. There's a lot of debris. In some cases, it's foam. There's a lot of foam that has accumulated. That's one example. Then he says, another example is وَمِمَّا يُقِدُونَ عَلَيْهِ فِي النَّارِ. Those metals that people melt. ابتغاء حلية أو متاع. Those metals that are used to create jewelry or tools and utensils, whether it's gold and silver or it's steel or some other metal, what happens with these metals is that they are heated. And through the process of heating, the impure matters that are in that ore begin to separate. And every metal needs to be heated to a certain degree in order for the other ores to separate. The other alloys in some cases, for them to separate. The impurities. So the water that has this extra and useless stuff, it's carrying with it. Sometimes it's covering the surface of the water. The gold, silver, other metal, it has these other impurities in it that need to be gotten rid of. So what happens here? فَأَمَّا الزَّبَدُ فَيَذْهَبُ جُفَاءً. The extra stuff, whether it's debris or it's foam on the surface of the water, a time comes when it gets pushed to the side. It gets pushed to the side and it gets left behind, and the water continues to flow clearly and clean. The same thing happens with the metals. When they're heated, the impurities eventually start separating and they're thrown to one side. So فَأَمَّا الزَّبَدُ فَيَذْهَبُ جُفَاءً. The extra stuff is always put to the side. It's useless, it's discarded. No one thinks about it. وَأَمَّا مَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسِ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That which is beneficial for people remains in the world. So the water that is beneficial for people, what do? People channel that water and make big dams, massive reservoirs. And there are so many usages for that, for the sake of drinking and irrigation and so many things that this water comes to use. That foam or that debris, is there any use of it? There's no use of it. Does anyone really think about it? Does anyone plan for it? No. It's isolated, it's kind of thrown onto the shores and forgotten about. And the same thing happens with the impure ores that are mixed with gold ore, silver ore, and so on and so forth. كَذَلِكَ يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْحَقَّ وَالْبَاطِلِ. The example of the pure substance and the impure substance is that of haqq and batil. That water that's flowing, that's going to remain, and it's going to be beneficial for people. The water remains, the foam or the debris is going to get washed to one side. It has no significance in front of this fast flowing water. The same thing happens with those impure oars. So batil, falsehood, it may be like it's covering the surface of deeds that are not accepted. مثل الذين كفروا أعمالهم كرماد اشتدت به الريح في يوم عاصف. The example of deeds that are done by people who don't believe. So they may have accumulated a lot of deeds, and it may look like these are great accomplishments, great feats. But on the day of judgment, those heaps and heaps of deeds are going to be like a heap of ashes on a day that is filled with stormy winds, and the wind is blowing at its fullest intensity. So what's going to happen to that heap of ashes? It's gone. It's completely gone. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another place, that we will turn to their acts, turn to their actions, no matter how many they are, and we're going to turn them into dust. وَقَدِمْنَا إِلَى مَا عَمِلُوا مِنْ عَمَلٍ. Allah says we're going to go to those a'mal. They may have done many things, but it's going to be as weightless, as meaningless as dust flying, floating through the sky. So deeds are only good if they're backed by the right beliefs. Otherwise, those deeds may bring fruits in dunya. They may bring fruits in dunya. Even somebody who does not have any belief, if they're doing good deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them and repay them in this dunya, one way or another. But in akhirah, they will not have access to anything. It will be like a person trying to chase after those ashes that are being blown in all directions by this powerful stormy wind. So that was the second example. The third example in Surah Ibrahim, Allah Azza wa Jal gives the example of kalima tayyibah, the kalima of iman. ألم تر كيف ضرب الله مثلا كلمة طيبة كشجرة طيبة أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء تؤتي أكلها كل حين بإذن ربها. Allah gives the example of the pure kalima, the kalima of tawheed, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Allah gives the example of this pure kalima like a beautiful tree. And this tree is not just appealing to look at, but it has very deeply rooted roots. Asluha thabit. Its roots are embedded very deep into the ground. وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. But its branches are shooting up into the sky. And what does this tree do? It doesn't just look good. تُؤْتِي أُكُلَهَا كُلَّ حِينٍ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهَا. This is a tree that is bearing fruit all the time. It's not seasonal. All the time, in every moment of life, this tree is bearing fruit, and that's exactly how Iman is. Iman is firmly rooted in the heart, but its branches are shooting everywhere. It does not remain hidden. Iman cannot remain hidden. It will manifest itself through what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has called them, the branches of Iman. Al-Imanu bid'un wa sittuna shu'bah. Or bid'un wa sab'una shu'bah. Iman has 62 or 60 some, 70 some branches. These are branches in the form of sifat, qualities. So this Iman will go deep into the heart. The deeper it is, the firmer it is, the higher the branches are going to be, and the more fruit it's going to give at all times. Sometimes this tree is showing its fruit in the form of sabr, sometimes in the form of shukr, sometimes in the form of tawakkul, sometimes in the form of khushu', sometimes in the form of ikhlas, sometimes in the form of love for Allah, sometimes in the form of love for Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, sometimes in the form of being staunch in one's deen. In many, many different ways, this tree is bearing fruit all the time. But on the other side, the khabith kalima, the filthy kalima, the kalima of kufr and shirk, kalimatin khabitha, كَشَجَرَةٍ خَبِيثَةٍ. The filthy word or statement or belief is like a filthy tree, meaning a useless tree, which تُثَّتْ مِنْ فَوْقِ الْأَرْضِ. It is very easily plucked off the face of the earth. مَا لَهَا مِنْ قَرَارٍ. It has no stability, there's nothing holding it down. Similarly, people who live by statements of disbelief or of shirk, what will happen? They will not reap, that statement will not reap any benefit in dunya, and will definitely not have anything to show for in akhirah. It's going to be torn out of the ground and thrown away. So these are some amthal, some examples that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. And the purpose of mithals, of examples, parables in the Quran, these parables are enabling us to understand a concept in a very easy way, in a very simple way. You can imagine it happening. You can picture it happening. And then the idea gets embedded, it stays in the mind. So these are some of the lessons from today's tilawat. You see, the amthal of the Quran, the examples of the Quran, people used to hear these examples and they used to say, what's the point of this example? Why is Allah giving all these examples? So in some places, Allah Azza wa Jal gives the example of small, minute things, like a gnat or a mosquito. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I don't hesitate to give the example of something as small as a bug or something bigger than that. The point is not the object that the example is being given of. The point is the concept. So those who have iman, it increases their iman, it increases their understanding. And those who don't have iman, then it makes them more confused, it makes them more distanced. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to reflect on these verses and enable us to bring haqq into our lives so that the batil separates itself and flees from us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq and the strength to remain steadfast on iman, so that when we leave, our deeds don't go scattering like a heap of ashes. Rather, our deeds remain preserved for us in our accounts, and they are there for us in our books of deeds. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the strength in our iman, so that our iman also becomes like that powerful tree. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi. Allah, 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 Allah.